Last week I was talking about Sinners and how Sinners was a hit, the number one movie in America for a couple of weeks. And I also said that The Preacher Boy in Sinners is based on an old legend about a blues player by the name of Robert Johnson who sold his soul to the devil. This is Jeffrey from Black Wall Street Chronicles. It's President. Make your acquaintance. Thank you for listening to your podcast, and I will talk about the legend of Robert Johnson. Now, this article that I'm about to read was written by Dave Roos. It's on a website called How Stuff Works. All right, and the title of the article is The Devil and Robert Johnson. Did the blues legend really sell his soul at the crossroads? It was 1930s in Robertson, Mississippi, and 19-year-old Robert Johnson, an aspiring blues musician, was hanging out of a juke joint where Delta blues legends Son House and Willie Brown were playing to a packed house. Between sets, Johnson dared to pick up one of the musicians' guitars and play his own stuff, but the crowd wasn't having it. He started to play and it be just noising the people, recalls Son House and remastered Devil at the Crossroads. Robert Johnson documentary on Netflix, and the folks they come out and say, why don't you go down and make that boy put that thing down? He's running us crazy. The club owners tossed Johnson out of the Robertsville juke joint, and that was the last that anybody heard from him for a year. Johnson simply disappeared from the Delta. The one night while House and Brown were paying a gather gig in Banks, Mississippi, in walks Johnson with a guitar case strapped to his back. House elbowed Brown and pointed mockingly at little Robert. Boy, where are you going with that thing? House asked Johnson. To nose somebody to death again? But this time something was different. Johnson took out his instrument, a regular 6-string guitar filled with an extra 7 strings, something neither House nor Brown had seen before. But that wasn't the only new thing. Johnson had acquired an insane skill level and unusual technique, strumming a series of rapid-fire chords that made the guitar sound almost like a piano with 3 hands playing it. How could this kid, who was lousy enough to get kicked off the stage and Robinson returned just a year later as the most talented blues guitarist in the Delta? To the stunned crowd in Banks, Mississippi, there was only one explanation. Johnson made a deal with the devil. The God-fearing black folks living in the 1920s Deep South, the blues was clearly the devil's music. It lured away good men and women to the juke joints where they would dance and drink and share unholy infection. So it would have made the perfect sense that Johnson's unearthly talent was bestowed by Satan. In fact, Johnson wasn't the first blues musician who repeatedly honed his skills with the help from the Prince of Darkness. An earlier guitar hero named Tommy Johnson, who is not related to Robert Johnson, but grew up in the same Mississippi county, was rumored to have go down to the crossroads and had his guitar tuned by the devil himself. In the Coen brothers movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, a character none other than Tommy Johnson tells his traveling companions that he just sold his soul at the crossroads for some wicked new guitar skills. Oh son, for that you trade your everlasting soul? Asked the witless Delmar. Well, replied Tommy, I wasn't using it. While the same soul story was told of Robert Johnson, he did little to dispel the rumor. In fact, he and cultivated the devilish connection. Of the 29 songs Johnson recorded before his untimely death at only 27 years old, there were Crossroad Blues, Hell Hollow on My Trail, Me and the Devil Blues, and Up Jump the Devil. Here's the real education of Robert Johnson. Stephen Johnson, a singer, preacher, and vice president of the Robert Johnson Blues Foundation, has a far more earthly explanation for how his grandfather Robert transformed seemingly overnight from an awkward amateur into the guitar playing genius who's inspired generations of world famous musicians, including Bob Dylan, Keith Richards, and Eric Clapton. I suggest that people step outside the myth and try to understand the talent, says Johnson in the interview. Just because Michael Jordan was as great as he was on the court. Just because Michael Jordan was as great as he was on the court does not mean that he sold his soul to the devil. He he practiced and he practiced twice as hard as everybody else. By Stevens' calculation, his grandfather's mysterious absence from the Delta music scene stretched for closer to 3 years, not just one. He has spent those years back in the hometown Hazelhurst, Mississippi, learning at the feet of guitar like Zimmerman. Robert had returned to Hazelhurst looking for his biological father, Noah Johnson, but found Zimmerman instead. Zimmerman will take Johnson out of the local cemetery at midnight to play the tombstones of departed spirits. No matter how bad you sound here, Zimmerman says in the documentary, nobody is going to complain. The cemetery story is probably apocryphal, but it added to Johnson's reputation as a haunted soul. The real apprenticeship with Zimmerman was likely foreordinary. Stephen Johnson said he met Zimmerman's daughter, who was only a little girl, when her father opened her home to run Robert. She said, "Your dad was at our house so much that I thought he was our brother," remembers Stephen. She asked his dad, "Is RL our brother?" "No, he's not your brother," Ike said. "He's just a musician and a good friend of mine. He would be there consistently. He would be there constantly." And the practice certainly paid off. On his recordings, Johnson was simultaneously playing the disjointed bass line on the low strings, rhythm on the mid strings, and lead on the treble strings while singing at the same time. Eric Clapton admirably recounted in the autobiography, according to Vanity Fair, it sounded like 7 people were playing at the same time. Johnson's finger-picking style set the template for the blues. Robert Johnson had a tough life. He was moved from house to house as a boy and abused by his stepfather. As a young man, he married his sweetheart, Virginia, who died of childbirth with their baby. Johnson found and lost other loves before taking to the road full-time and earning a reputation as a hard-drinking womanizer. The husband of one of Johnson's mistresses is believed to poison him at the death of 27. Johnson remained obscure until a re-release of his album, King of the Delta Blues Singers, in 1961. But when Stephen Johnson listens to his grandfather's music, he doesn't hear a callous heathen, but the voice of the man who wants to do better and be better, but who is weighed down by painful memories, sin, and pride. Even the song Crossroad Blues, what casual listeners might think is a retelling of Robert's fateful midnight meeting with the devil, means something different to Stephen. "I went to the crossroad, fell down on my knees," sings Johnson in his eerie and cool voice. "Ask the Lord above, have mercy. Now save poor Bob, if you please." "Does this sound like a man who's making a deal with the devil?" asked Stephen. "He was at crossroads in his life, and that's what my granddad did at the crossroads. He was searching and trying to do good." Learn about Robert Johnson and the Crossroads, the life and afterlife of blues legend Robert Johnson by Tom Graves. Yeah, I believe that's the name of the biography. Yeah, yeah, the book that talks about Robert Johnson's life is on Amazon. It's called Crossroads: The Life and the Afterlife of Blues Legend Robert Johnson. You know why? Yeah, so if you guys are looking for a group to read, you can read the book. Later on, I'm going to put a link to the book on the bottom of this podcast episode, so you guys can click and read the document and read the book on yourself about the blues player that is responsible for inspiring the movie Sinners that I talked about last week. This is Black Wall Street Chronicles, and I'm Jeffrey Frazier. I'm signing off.